Perhaps the question I get asked most often about the work of Theopolis, and particularly its reading of Scripture, is where are the breaks? What are the controls? How do I know that my reading of Scripture with this Theopolitan approach, or through new eyes, is not just seeing things where nothing is to be seen? This is indeed a genuine challenge, and one that we should take very seriously. It seems to me that if we are to be faithful readers of Scripture, we have to beware not just of under-reading the text, but also of over-reading it. Within the context of James Jordan's work, there's an emphasis upon not missing out on the treasures of the text, and a sort of interpretive maximalism is designed to equip us to read the text for all that it's worth. Unfortunately, many people, when they first encounter this, run away with it. They see all sorts of things in the text that might not be there. And so what I want to do within this and perhaps following few videos is to consider how we can have controls upon our reading. What are some of the ways that we rein ourselves in and prevent ourselves from going off the rails? Are there rails? Are there breaks? Are there ways in which we can prevent the errors that can occur when we're reading the Bible and seeing connections where none exist? Let's first of all start by considering some of the dangers, and these dangers can occur in a variety of forms. For some, there's a sort of master system that can be brought to bear upon the Scripture. Maybe it's a particular system in which there are a number of different features that are expected to occur in every single text. And so you come to a passage of Scripture and you already think you know what you ought to find there. As a result, you might not be especially attentive to the text on its own terms. You're looking for something rather than listening to the text and hearing what it has to say. And so that is one of the most obvious dangers. In some cases, this can come as a sort of master key for the Scripture. Some who would take such an approach are reading the text in a way that make it seem like an esoteric text, a text that is only accessible to those who have some hermetic insight, some insight into the text that presents them as having a sort of prophetic role relative to those who lack that key insight that would unlock everything else. If you are not reading in this way, are you reading at all? That is one sort of danger, and it imposes upon the text from outside. Now, there are other dangers where we are looking for patterns within the text. Human beings are pattern-recognizing creatures. We've been created as those who are supposed to recognize order within our world. And as a result, we can easily over-recognize order. We can recognize order where no order is, or where a different sort of order exists. So when we're reading Scripture, we need to be aware of the danger of seeing order where it does not exist. That danger can often be seen in literary structures. Not every passage has a straightforward form of chiasm within it. There are chiasms in Scripture, and they help us to understand the text, and yet not every passage has a straightforward chiastic structure. It would be great, perhaps, if it did, but often these structures are not present. And often the sort of parallels that we are looking for, the sorts of structures, the sort of connections, they are absent in key texts. And their absences actually strengthens the importance of their presence in other texts. If every single text had these details, then the details would not be as illuminating as they actually are. It is the distinctiveness of certain features of texts that make them significant. And so often when we're reading Scripture, what we're looking for is a way to be attentive, to read the text maximally, but not to read it in an exaggerated fashion, not to see things where they are not. A further danger can be seen in the ways that we think in terms of exaggerated symbols. Symbols are to be seen everywhere. Every single detail has to be a symbol. And yet often there are details in Scripture that are merely historical details. Not everything has to be symbolic. We always need to be open to the presence of symbolic details. But the mere presence of a detail in Scripture does not entail symbolic import. That care to read the text as principally a historical witness helps us to avoid the danger of approaching it as always this hermetic code. A further danger is reading the Bible as if it were a sort of code. Reading the Bible as if we're supposed to read beyond the letter of the text, as if the true meaning of the text were not found in the witness that it gives to historic events, to the character of God, and to the law for his people, but rather in some sort of details behind the text. And we have to deduce these by some sort of esoteric process. That's always a danger of which we should beware. One danger we need to be aware of is the fact that we can give ourselves many degrees of freedom when we're interpreting things. An example of this would be the number 24, for instance. The number 24 is 2 times 12. It's 6 times 4. It is 25 minus 1. It is something that can be used and broken down in a number of different ways. And as a result, it's very easy to give different sorts of symbolism to a number. We can divide it into 2 and see it as connected to Israel in some way, 12 times 2. Or maybe it's the 4 corners of the world connected with humanity, created on day 6. All of these associations can be invited when we start to manipulate numbers in that sort of way. And so we need to be careful to recognize how many degrees of freedom we are allowing ourselves. The more degrees of freedom that we allow ourselves in breaking down a number like that, the more that connection is weakened, because the specific detail that we are connecting with some other could be connected to another detail entirely if we were to choose some other way of breaking it down. Likewise, if you're thinking about associations between things, we need to be aware of giving ourselves a certain latitude in interpreting a detail that enables us to connect it to all sorts of different things. Let's say we're considering associations with the days of creation. We're thinking about the dress of the high priest. Now, could the dress of the high priest be connected with day 1? Sure, the high priest is like light in the firmament of the sanctuary. And as he bears that light, he is wearing this garment that has the glorious plate on the front, holy to the Lord. He's the one who's connected with the lampstand, and his garments of glory and beauty are like light, as he is a light bearer. You could think about it also in relationship to day 2, in relationship to the structure of the tabernacle as a sort of firmament dividing this holy sanctuary from the common world. Likewise, his garments divide him from others. It's a sort of firmament. Connect him with day 3. Perhaps it's like the clothing of the earth with vegetation. Or maybe day 4, he's light in the firmament. Or day 5, as in the structure of the days of creation, in the ordering of the tabernacle, the garments of the high priest seem to be connected with day 5, and the parallel with the garments of the tabernacle. Day 6, it's establishing man. Maybe it's dress connected to rest. Day 7. All of those associations are ones that we might allow ourselves to make. And if we're not careful in holding ourselves responsible, we can think we've made a strong connection when really we would allow ourselves to connect that detail with any of the days of creation. So be aware of how many degrees of freedom you are allowing yourself. And the more the degrees of freedom that you will allow yourself, the weaker your connection actually is. Beware of that.